I work awesome. I work with athletes primarily, but I also work with non-athletes. So this is a topic that, regardless of who I found myself working with, is really applicable because it's applicable to humans, and we are all humans. So I'm excited to talk through this today, but we're going to be looking at the topic of self-care. I put that in quotes because we're going to talk about what that means, but through the lens of core values, which we'll also spend some time just talking about what that means. So a little bit of an overview. So we're going to just start quickly with kind of looking at the terms burnout and compassion fatigue, which I'm sure you guys are at least familiar with burnout. Then we're going to work on defining what self-care is. And the bulk of what we'll do today is that core values workshop that's going to be a little bit more interactive. So I do just want us to pause, and I want everyone just to take a deep breath, because everyone's coming in here today with something. Could be personal stress, professional stress. Like there's something, at least one thing. For a lot of us, it's actually multiple things. But a lot of times conversations around self-care are can feel like a to-do list of more things to do. And that is not the heart behind this today. The heart behind this is not about doing more. It's actually about doing less, but just doing it more intentionally. So looking at that. So if you guys are coming in and it's like, oh, great, this is going to be a list of more things I need to do to take care of myself, I want us to take a deep breath and settle into the next, 30, 35 minutes of today is really about kind of reflecting inward and figuring out, what do I need? And that's the heart behind today. So we will jump in and I'm going to go through this one pretty quickly because people are, tend to be a little bit more familiar with these terms, but let's just start by looking at what are burnout and then what's the term compassion fatigue. So burnout is chronic workplace stress that is not managed well. So right off the bat, I think this is important to note that this can be true for someone who works 20 hours in a job and someone who works 90 hours a week in a job. It has to do with how we manage it. So there's no hierarchy. It's totally possible to experience burnout as a part-time employee, and it's totally possible to be thriving and not experience burnout as someone who's working 80, 90 hours a week. So I think sometimes there's some stigma with, I don't know if I'm allowed to have burnout because I work part-time, and then vice versa. It's like, I don't know, I'm actually working 80, 90 hours a week and I feel okay. And then certainly the reverse is true as well, that burnout can affect really anybody because it has to do with how we manage it. So some common experiences of burnout can be feeling depleted of energy and feeling exhausted, having an increased mental distance from your job. So just feeling kind of like that separation from what you're doing in a negative way, having a negative or cynical view of your job itself, reduce professional efficacy. Like you're just showing up and it's like, man, I don't feel like I'm good at my job right now. Like I just am kind of struggling through it. Symptoms can include fatigue, insomnia, negative views of self or others, anger, irritability, just a lot of those kind of mental, emotional, cognitive effects. So that's burnout. Compassion fatigue is interesting. Just quick show of hands. Have you guys heard of the term compassion fatigue before? Yeah. Okay. So this is something we're familiar with, but I always like to kind of differentiate that compassion fatigue is unique to helping professions. And everyone in here is in a helping profession because you're either in healthcare or you're in education or your background is in both, which means you guys are tasked with helping people, whether it's helping students or helping in a medical kind of healthcare setting. And so this is something just to be aware of and be reminded that compassion fatigue is real. And it's when the burden of helping others in your professional life starts to kind of bleed into your personal well-being. So this can look really similar to burnout, but also just a unique layer to be aware of and pay attention to as someone in a helping profession. So when we talk about burnout and compassion fatigue, typically we have to talk about, well, what do we do with it? And typically that conversation goes towards self-care. But my question I always like to ask is, okay, well, what is self-care? Because that is such a buzzword right now. And in a lot of ways, it's great that people are talking about it and it's all over social media and culture and news right now. And those are really good things. But a lot of times it can feel like this very disconnected list of things that we feel like we're supposed to do that actually make us feel more burnt out. So just because I was interested in it, just this week, I got on Instagram and Pinterest specifically and just typed in self-care. And these were actual things that I saw come up, suggestions. So take a bath, go work out, say no to more things, say yes to more things, travel more, spend more time at home, be kind to yourself, make yourself go do something, spend more time with other people, drink water, save money, just be you. Accept where you are, do a skincare routine, right? And some of you guys are kind of laughing as we read through this because number one, this list is all over the place and there's contradictory things on here. So it's like, well, what do I do? Do I spend more time with people or do I spend more time alone? Do I say no to things? Do I say yes to things? And at the end, we just feel like I don't even know how to do self-care and it feels too overwhelming. So I'm just not going to do it. But for the purposes of today, we are going to define self-care as taking care of yourself, which I know you're probably like, Maddie, that's also very vague, but we're going to get into what that means. But I really do mean that today is very much focused on you as an individual. So that's what we're going to focus on because what I need to take care of myself is very different than what Chrissy needs and what Kara needs and what everyone on here needs. So the way that we are going to kind of conceptualize self-care is actually by talking through core values. So core values, we're going to define these as the ideals that we order our life around. They are the things that we want to make decisions based off of, both in the present and also in the future. It's kind of the basis for what we want to pursue, both professionally and personally. Core values really represent our belief system, our highest priorities. It's the things that drive us. And ultimately, it's the things that really refresh our soul and give us purpose and give us peace. So pretty important, right? We look at the definition, of core values here, and it's like, okay, I need to know what these are. If these are the things that I'm basing my decisions off of and are driving me and refreshing my soul, I need to pay attention to these things. So we're going to engage in a core values workshop. That's what we're going to do with the bulk of our time. And this is going to be pretty interactive. I'm going to have you guys write down quite a bit of stuff and just kind of review some stuff. So the way that we're going to do this is the goal is for you guys to walk away today really knowing and feeling confident about what are my top 10 just personal core values? What are the things that, going back to our definition, what are the things that I want to order my life around and make decisions based off of? And how do I let that inform how I take care of myself? So the first step is we're going to review a bunch of values, and I'll walk you through that. Then we're going to work on kind of ranking them and then some reflection questions, but that's where we're headed with this. So this is the first screen of about 9. There's going to be about 80 different words that will appear on the screen. And what we're going to do is I'm going to give you guys about a minute to look through these words and write down what you feel that kind of magnetic connection to. When we look at identifying our core values, it's what are the things that we can't live without? What are the things that are just wildly important to us? We feel immediately drawn to. All 80, I think there's like 80 or 90, all of these things are good. So, but we're looking for what speaks to you and what really stands out in a way that you feel really connected to. So there's lots of ways to do this. You guys can write down more than 10 and then, kind of narrow them down at the end. If you want to just go for 10 right off the bat, go for it. But with this screen, I'll give you guys about, 30, 40 seconds. And then I'll say next, and then I'll just click through each of the subsequent slides and give you guys about a minute each on each slide. And I'll say next when I'm going to move forward. So this is your time to reflect, see what you connect with, make your list, and then at the end, we'll process through it. I'm also so sorry. There are two leaf blowers right outside of my window at work. I don't know if you guys can hear that, but I think they're moving. Okay, I'm going to click to the next slide. All right, next slide. All right, next slide. Next slide. All right, next slide. All right, next slide. We've got just a couple more. All right, next. And I believe this is our last one. And then, of course, if there's something that a word that better encapsulates, a value of yours, add that. This list is, not, it's extensive, but it's not exclusive. So definitely feel free to write anything or add anything that you really connect with. Okay. I'm going to go ahead and click off of this, but I know we flew through those. So if you guys want, definitely reach out at the end. You'll have my contact info, or it might be in the chat. So definitely reach out. I'm happy to send you guys that too, because I really hope that today is just the first time that you guys are thinking about this and looking at it, and not the last time. So, okay, you guys should have some sort of list. Some of you may have 10, some of you may have less than 10, some of you may have like 30 or 40. But this next step is really important. And I want to give us some space to do this, because the next step with this is to actually take our top 10 and put them in order. And this is really hard because these are all good things. These are things that are important to us. And some of you may be like, I have 30 things I wrote down. I don't know how to put them in order. So what I'll say about this is just start putting them in order. And then anything after 10, we'll just draw a line and know that those are values, but they're not our core values. So why this is important, and as I'm talking, feel free to start kind of working on your list, but it's important that we put these in order and really know well the hierarchy of our core values, because the hierarchy of them helps give us direction. It helps us make the decisions. It helps us prioritize what we need to focus on. And, this is a very real thing that happens, where a lot of times in life, we are faced with situations where two of our core values might be in opposition to one another. And in those moments, it is really important for us to know, okay, which one happens to be more important in this scenario. So a very trivial example of this would be, if risk and safety are both in your top 10 and you have a chance to go skydiving, it's like, okay, well, which one is probably more important in this scenario? And there's no right or wrong answer. It's just, if risk is more important, you probably say yes. If safety is more important, you probably say no. Right. So, that's a trivial example, but that's how we already can see how these inform, and the order in which these come in inform decisions we might make. And, a very, very real application is, situations in relationships where there's something we value, and, we have to have hard conversations or make professional decisions where things feel conflicting a little bit. And this really does happen. I work with clients and athletes all the time who are faced with decisions where they're having to say, okay, I have two things that are really important to me. This is a hard decision. And it's, hey, okay, let's look at this hierarchy. Let's look at what is most important in this situation. So I'll give you guys about a minute or two more just to kind of sit with this and try your best. Again, if you don't get it done, that's okay. Let's let this be kind of the start of this process. But I'll give you guys a little bit of time to work on that and really try to come up for you with what's the hierarchy and the priority here. Okay, we'll take about 30 more seconds if you need some time to finish this up. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move on to some reflection questions, which this really is the heart of this. We obviously need to recognize what our core values are. So we have to do the workshop part, but these questions really are the heart of this. And again, I would encourage, let this be the first time that you guys are asking these questions, and I can send these to you guys, or feel free to take a screenshot of this or write them down kind of with the core values. Well, let's just start with the first one. So as you look at this list of these 10, or the work in progress list if you're not done, but as you look at these in order 1 to 10, which core values do you most feel in alignment with currently and most connected to? Where you look at it and you say, yeah, like, man, I'm operating on all cylinders with this. Like, I feel really connected to this right now. I feel really invested, and I feel like I'm intentionally cultivating this one. Go ahead and, make some sort of mark by them, but and maybe it's one, maybe it's 8 or 9 of them. Everyone is different. You may look at this and think, man, if I'm being honest, I really don't feel in alignment with any of these. So this is why we do this, because this is kind of that real life self-reflection of, okay, here's what I think is important. Am I actually pursuing it? On the flip side of that, the next question is, as we're taking inventory of these things, which of our core values do we feel really out of alignment with and really disconnected from, where we're looking at this word on this paper and we know it's important to us, but we do not feel connected to it. We can't kind of get there yet, or for whatever reason, we haven't really been cultivating it or being intentional with it. And again, there might be one, there might be none, there might be, 8 or 9 that stand out to you of like, man, I'm looking at this paper and I know that in my head this is important, but I feel pretty disconnected from this. In the spirit of vulnerability, because first and foremost, I am a counselor. Is there anyone who feels comfortable sharing just your experience as you look at your list with the first 2 questions of, man, yeah, I'm seeing some things I'm connected to, or yeah, this is, as I take inventory of this, I'm realizing there's some stuff I'm pretty out of alignment with. Anyone feel comfortable sharing?
I'll share. So I just in reviewing my values and ranking them, I can see where there's a disconnect between how I'm spending my time and what I value most. And so that's what really stood out to me. And I think that is also very tied to the burnout as well. I mean, I can see how all of this goes hand in hand. So thank you for this exercise.
Yeah, I really appreciate you sharing that. Because gosh, what a normal human experience. I know I've looked at my own list of 10 before and been like, oh, yikes. Like, man, I feel really disconnected from this. But what's always interesting is typically that also aligns professionally, times where I'm feeling pretty disconnected and burnout from work as well. So it is interesting to kind of engage in this type of reflection, really looking at it on paper and saying, man, I don't feel connected to this. And also, wow, what a coincidence. I feel really burnt out right now. Does anyone else feel comfortable sharing?
Hey, Chair. I just was noticing that a lot of the values on my list take quite a bit of time apart from work. Some things I can do while I'm at work, and it's just a mindset shift. But I think it was striking to me how much just time some of these would take to really kind of connect with.
Yeah. So that is a great point. And that's really what I want to kind of continue addressing with the next 2 questions. And then as we look at how do we do this? Because I said at the beginning, the heart of this today, I do not want it to be a list of more things to do. I want it to be a list of less things to do, just more intentionally. And that's hard, right? It's hard to make that switch. There's some, practical stuff there. So this third question, and this is one that I definitely do want you guys to write this one down because we won't have time to dive into this. I mean, sometimes I spend multiple sessions with clients on this one question, but as you look at these, we want to make these really practical because these are lifelong values, right? If you did this same exercise 10 years from now, you may have 3 or 4 of them that have changed, and just based off life experience, we tend to value new things or different things, but the core of your core values is going to be the same in 10 years. Probably your top 3, 4 is going to be pretty steady. So these are not change these overnight. It's the marathon of how do I over time cultivate these things? How do I over time move more into alignment with these things? Because if we're looking at our list of 10 things that, are 10 core values, and we are rocking and rolling with them, we feel really in alignment with them, we're probably living like close to what our dream life would be. I don't know, myself included, anyone who's ever said, yep, all 10 I feel in alignment with. I don't know that that's real. I don't know that that ever happens all at once. I hope it does. But on the flip side, we might look at them and say, yeah, I don't feel connected with these at all. And quite honestly, I don't like life right now is not a life that I feel excited about. And a lot of times those go hand in hand. So the temptation, right, as Americans, it's how do I fix this right now? Especially in, kind of the health solutions world, we're very, that medical model is how do I fix this? How do I come at this with a plan and implement that plan and, really lean in and fix it? But I really want us to shift this view of, hey, these are lifelong things that we mold into, not solutions that we fix overnight. Yeah, Kara, what's up?
Am I allowed to ask a question? Oh no, we're waiting to the
Yeah.
end.
Or you can if you want. I mean, I think we're going to be fine on time.
Oh, okay. I guess my question is like, are they all within our control? Like really, I'm not trying to get out of it maybe, but I just like, are they all really within our control? And I think that's where I like, oh, that's too lofty of I can't have that, or whatever. Like, it's almost like I feel like there's other factors. So I don't think that I can make the changes, and that's just an excuse. But do you have anything to say about that, really?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. And the reality is, what I would ask you is it in your control? As we look at each of these, if we look at, let's just say the word family, because that's on the top of my mind. If we look at family and it's, gosh, a lot of family stuff doesn't really feel in my control. It's okay. Well, let's ask that question for real. And let's say, okay, if family is important to me and there's so much that feels out of my control, what are the very small things that I can control? So at the end of the day, when I'm looking at myself in the mirror, I know that I have done what I can to cultivate this. And the reality is sometimes we look at these values and there's not a lot that we can control. There probably is something, and it might just be, with that example, sending a text, like that might be the extent to what we can control and cultivate. But that's a really great question that I encourage you guys to ask about these core values is, what can I control? And going back to, this third question of really, what are the very small, very practical steps I can take towards this? Not the big things. Like, so much of core value cultivation is consistency over intensity. And it's looking at how can I just consistently interact with this? So I know that's not a black and white answer. In a lot of ways, that your question is the answer in some ways, is looking at it and saying, well, quite frankly, what can I control here? And then having the courage to try to do that.
Yeah. And that's where the empowerment comes in, and you feel like you're more creating the life you want that way too. So,
yeah.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's a great question. So yeah, so we'll kind of wrap this up, but and then the fourth question is, are there things, as we look at this, are there things that we need to cut out of our life? Are we focused on 9 and 10 when 1 and 2, like we're not even connected to those? Do we need to flip priorities? Are we focusing on things that aren't even in our top 10? And what would it look like to slowly, consistently try to lean in a little bit more? So again, these are big questions. These are not like 35 minutes on a Friday afternoon questions. But I just want to introduce these and encourage you guys to be thinking about these. So, how we connect these to our professional world is when we cultivate our personal core values, a lot of times we end up having kind of the mental and emotional capacity to then really lean into things at work that we feel passionate about. We're not going to feel passionate about everything at work. There are parts of my job that I don't like. I hate writing case notes. Anyone who's been in the field with case notes probably feels the same way. My EHR system is the death of me on some days, but I love other parts of what I do if I'm in a place personally where I have the margin for that. And that looks different for everyone, but it's definitely possible. So just to recap, leaning into our core values personally can help bring us peace. And a lot of times our culture gets caught up in chasing happiness and we forget about the importance of peace. And a lot of times our core values are really tied to peace more than they are even happiness. And then it's difficult to feel professional burnout if personally we're feeling peace and refreshed and feeling like we have margin. So I've said it a lot, but I encourage you guys, don't let this be the last time that you think about this. Let this be the first time. My contact info is up here. If you guys want me to send you these slides, these questions. If you have other good questions outside of our time constraints today, email them to me. I would love to support you guys and kind of think through, what does this look like? I love working and getting to just pour into professors and teachers because it's such a cool multiplication effect, because as professors and as leaders of students, if you guys are modeling, what it looks like to pursue your core values and how that plays out in your professional life, your students pick up on that. And it's such a cool multiplication effect where maybe you have this type of conversation with your class and your students. And so I would love to support you guys really however I can in this continued conversation. And I would encourage you guys to continue this conversation amongst yourself and with your colleagues, with your loved ones. Share, hey, I had to come up with this list today. Some girl named Maddie popped on Zoom and made me come up with this list. I want to share it with you. But we'll pause there. We'll wrap there and then kind of have a few minutes for questions. I know we've only got about 5 minutes left. I want to respect the time constraints. But if you guys have any questions, definitely let me know.
I've got a comment. I know your fourth question was great too about, what can you cut out of your life? And what's interesting, I love podcasts and I've been listening to a bunch of podcasts recently. And so many of the podcasts that I listen to, they're all talking about just having a better nighttime routine and a better morning routine. Because if your bedtime routine is up to par, then the chances of your morning routine being up to par is better. And I think that makes a lot of sense too, because for me, at night, I need a much better nighttime routine because I just waste time on social media. I'm so bad at saying that, but I think it's so true about just having better bedtime and morning routines just to help you just live a more balanced, abundant life and just being more aware of how you're using your time and not wasting your time. So just wanted to share that. It's a common thing I'm hearing today about your bedtime and your morning routine.
Yeah, I love that. And that just is one example, but going back to the idea of consistency over intensity, just how do we kind of consistently try to show up and do this thing?
I like that. Yeah, that's great. Thank you. That was great. Great presentation.
Thanks. Okay, I see a couple hands. Is it Sean Marie? I don't know if your name's Marie or Sean, but what's your question?
Actually, I had also had a comment, and that is that I just read a study that was related to values and intellectual humility, and the research was about how if they had educators, like people who work in a higher ed setting, take just 5 minutes to really think about their three core values, the three things that are really important to them, their core values, which of course starts with this awareness, like this activity you walked us through. But if you spend 5 minutes really thinking about your core values, what they found was that when those people then came to the table to talk about topics that were heated topics, difficult topics, the kind where nobody agrees, people demonstrated greater intellectual humility, and they were able to empathize and see others' perspectives a lot more clearly. And I just think that's such a cool piece of research and such a nice tie-in to this. I wanted to share that.
Yeah, I love that. That's really cool. Thanks for sharing that. Anne, I see your hand emojis up.
Yeah, I was just gonna make an observation. Thinking about these as core values, and that these are in a way lifelong values. And as I get closer to 65 and starting to, not yet, but starting to think about retirement, totally different place in my life. I can imagine, had I done this, even 15 years ago, my list would have been much longer. And I can see that there are some other things that are rising to the top differently now, right? Like, comfort, safety, health, whereas those were, important, but probably not right up at the top. So at least in my own experience, I'm looking at that these things are reordering in a way, as I get older.
Yeah, I love that perspective. Definitely. And it's funny you share that because it even gives me increased perspective on when I do this exercise with teenagers. They're like, Maddie, everything's important to me. And I'm like, okay, but we've got to narrow it down because, it's that whole saying, if everything's important to you, in some ways, nothing's important.
Right.
And so I love your perspective on that. And Tina, what about you?
Yeah, I was just going to say, when you narrow it down to the 10, I feel a sense of tug of war, because to focus on one, I have to feel like I have to sacrifice another. And so it's about how to set those boundaries for each to let them all in and let you have a piece of all of that when that's your core. And that's a struggle sometimes. When you look at health, when your health is not optimal, but yet you're trying to work professionally to continue to thrive and achieve and meet the expectations, you almost have to sacrifice one to get the other, depending on what the extent is. So it's really, for me right now, it's struggling to set those boundaries.
Yeah, gosh, I love that point. And I know that we're at time, so I guess we can wrap with this, but boundaries is a huge part of this. Again, I mean, this is like so much bigger than a 35-minute conversation, and I encourage you guys, keep asking these questions and keep kind of thinking through these, because the boundaries thing is big. And there are times where for whatever reason, we cannot focus on one of our core values until we kind of get some of the others in order, even if that one is higher. And it's a helpful thing with core values to remember that every time we say no to something, we're saying yes to something. And vice versa. Every time we say yes to something, we're saying no to something. So even if we're saying no to, number 7 or 8 or 9, what is that allowing us to say yes to? So it gets into the boundaries and all of that. But these are such good comments and insights, and I'm excited for you guys to keep engaging with this and keep kind of processing through what this means for you. And how this looks very different as our definition of self-care than getting on and Pinterest and seeing a list of go take a bath. Because for some of you, it's like, that doesn't even remotely fit with any of these things. How is that going to help me feel refreshed? For some of you, it might. But if we start to transition that idea of self-care to cultivating core values, it might look a little bit different.
Mm-hmm. So true. Yeah. Thank you so much, Maddie. That was great presentation. And thank you all for joining today on a Friday afternoon. I appreciate it.
Yes,
And
thank you,
then
Karen.
we will, yeah, thank you. And then we'll see, Karen and I will see you again next month, where we have Sean is going to be our guest speaker. So more to come on that for next month. But thank you again, and have a great weekend.
Yeah. Thanks,
Bye.
guys.
Thanks. Bye.